Hey folks, this is Tully and welcome to some more game dev. Today we're jumping back in with some art integration. Trixie's got us some new HUD art, which we're going to try getting set up. Since the last stream on Monday, which was like, I guess, close to a week ago, we've done a little bit more work around some attack queuing so that we can have multiple attacks queued up at the same time, which is just hard to describe over stream, but is making the game feel a lot better. And then some miasma stuff, aka Fog of War. So it's been a somewhat productive couple of days. We can jump in, kind of show a little bit of that off, as well as kind of jump into looking at some of the HUD UI that's mid-progress. The miasma is something I've had on my list for months now, and I've just been putting off because I figured it was going to be a huge hassle. We're going to continue from this save file. It ended up being really straightforward, like really straightforward, mostly because I found an asset pack that did exactly what I wanted to do. So essentially we have a Fog of War system in which we have some fog with lower transparency on the tiles that have been revealed, and the tiles next to tiles that haven't been revealed have a much darker kind of fog around them. Just to give props where props are due, so I'm using this fog and lighting bundle from Cronek. Really fantastic, really highly reviewed. The base version, which is primarily what I'm using right now, which is the volumetric fog and mist stuff. I haven't really looked too deep into the lighting part of it, but this has got a lot of reviews and is pretty like old from what I can see. It seems like this thing has been around for like almost a decade. So yeah, I went looking for volumetric fog or Fog of War type tutorials, ended up running into like this system that it was just too good not to try and use, and I think it's just doing everything I want right out of the box, which I don't usually dig too deep into like Unity Store assets. I tend to like to build a lot of the stuff myself, but this just seemed too perfect. And I will admit, like, shader stuff is definitely where I am weaker. I can do some stuff like getting these billboards hooked up correctly with their alpha and transparency working, but this type of Fog of War stuff was definitely going to take me a lot longer, and after maybe like, I don't know, 6-7 hours yesterday, I've got it mostly figured out, at least for the purposes I need it for. So pretty happy with that. Also, we've got it so when we start attacking an enemy, we can queue up attacks so that attacks can be swung more quickly. Again, hard to communicate that over stream, but that's something we did in the last few days, and that's been pretty good. Also been working with Trixie on some of the HUD stuff. Right, switching between scenes doesn't work right now because most of the scenes don't have the Fog of War, and the game kind of expects it now, so I've got to go through and update all of the rooms with that stuff. I want to show off the HUD. Okay, so we're going to go back in and we're going to load the same save file. The idea here, and this is something I've mentioned I think in passing a few times in previous streams, but didn't have it set up and animating like we have now, but we wanted to try doing this thing where your time remaining before you run out of like the goddess's energy and the demon lord's power, now represented by this kind of fog miasma, overwhelms you. We wanted to kind of represent that as a pocket watch, and so we've kind of done a little bit of work, mostly Drixie, around making it so that this thing can open up and then can close. Oh, it helps if I actually select the correct version of it. So yeah, so we can open it and we can close it, and that's pretty cool, but obviously we need to get the HUD turning off when it's closed and turning on when it's open. The other half of this is going to be where we're going to put some of this health and like these magic points, which I still don't have a purpose for, but we want to give space in case we do something with it. But essentially the idea here is that health will be in this upper section of the pocket watch's lid, essentially, and these kind of like extra skill points that'll be used for more powerful abilities will be down here and will kind of turn on as you gain them. And then, of course, the clock itself is still draining as it had been before. But we need to do a fair amount of setup and overhaul in order to get this thing working. So, with that being the case, I guess we're going to just jump into it. So, a lot of the art pieces are here, but we need to get the clock display prefab open up in scene view, and we got to arrange this. Let's, for the sake of getting everything placed, swap into the final open frame. Oh, wrong file. Here. Alright, and then we're going to turn off the bar, and there should be... Okay, even before anything else, let's make sure all of this is set up correctly. I think it's going to be easier if we do this in the front end scene, because everything will be more pixel perfect in that situation. Let's go core, front end. And then if we come into the combat UI, combat screens, and then look at this clock display, I believe this should be more pixel perfect. Okay, turn off the text. And now we're going to want to add more images. We're not going to want the animator stuff on it, but we're going to want the radial frame. We're going to want to set this to be the correct size, so 70, 87. And I believe we need to be at half pixels in order for this to work correctly, but let's just get it lined up close. It's going to be somewhere around there. No. That's too high, so it does need to be down a little bit. -1? I wonder if this should be the background piece now and everything else should be under it. Yeah, now we're in it. Now we're doing the game dev. All the cool explanation stuff is mostly done and we are just building. So we want... what are we going to call this? Timer frame. It almost feels like it's not the right size. 7087, what is this at? Oh, it's not. This needs to be 165/98. Okay. Now they should be able to fit. Yeah, it's always 0.5. Now, Drixie did want me to mention that this art is still very much placeholder at this point. We do anticipate that this will get a further refinement. But we kind of want to just see it in action. Okay, now this is supposed to be this bar, so it needs these settings. So let's copy this component, save ourselves some time, and paste values in here. And then that should be filling. We will get some weird chopped pixels as we kind of do this fill, but I think when we're in engine, it should just snap to some amount of pixel perfect ones being removed. So let's call this stopwatch bar, and this will be, maybe a better term is to keep using the same words, stopwatch frame. The next piece we're going to need over top of this is the oh, why don't I see it? Okay, we're going to have to go into Sprite. I think we're missing a few PNGs. It's not in here. If we go to frame here, okay, so this is what this needs to look like in the end. We need the opacities. So these things are meant to overlap perfectly, and what I'm going to do with them is I'm going to set them up so that these objects basically fade down and fade up to kind of give the illusion of this thing like powering on, like a digital display turning on. Now, I'm pretty positive I didn't see these assets in this folder. I'm gonna take a look at them in Explorer. Yeah, I'm not seeing them. Okay, so we're gonna re-export them. Yeah, definitely not seeing them. Okay, so we're gonna re-export these. So we'll turn off everything. And then just turn on the dome, give it full transparency, and then we will copy this. We'll do magic wand, copy, file. I guess technically, actually, I was going to reduce the size of it, but for my sake of stream and making this as easy to understand as possible, I think I want to do this as a full-sized image. That way we can just overlap it and it should be the exact same dimensions and we shouldn't have to do any positioning stuff for now. No, I'm just gonna have to redo the work later. No, we'll do it right. We'll do it right. Okay. Copy, new, sure, new, delete the background, paste that in. We do want to make sure all file sizes are even. Pixel stuff tends to get a little weird if we don't have everything at powers of 2. Alright, save as. We're going to call this lid overlay. Yes. Okay, and then we're going to turn this off and turn on this one. We're going to do full opacity. Select, new, okay. Save as, stopwatch. Overlay, save that out, okay. Alright, back to placing things. So in here, we're going to want to grab the stopwatch overlay. And this needs to be a different set of dimensions, 68 by 85? What did I just say? '86. And then that looks about right. Now if we grab the alpha and we bring that down, that seems good. Ooh, okay, cool trick. I think we want to overshoot. So I think we actually want this to be pure white. Continuous off. Save over this. Now, if we choose to make this full alpha, that'll be the wrong color. But if we just do a color pick, that should be identical. So now we can go to here, and then we could also do a, like, transition up. Interesting. Okay. Overlay. I'm going to grab a separate version of this. I'm going to make this pure white. We're going to turn off the base one. And then on this one, I think what I might want to do is we'll go... So the order of animations will be, this will be fully darkened out as it opens up. This will lighten to indicate its glow. And then once it's fully turned off, I think I'm going to turn this one on just a little bit more to kind of give it like this flash, like it's turned on and it's glowing a little bit. Okay. And then... we need to work on the other side. So on this side over here... Actually, before that, I want to fix some of these other images to make sure that they are power of twos. This one's off as well. If this one's off, yeah, it is. That one's going to be more of a pain to change. So we'll leave the background for now. Okay. So then these ones over here. Let's copy the overlay again. This will be, I guess, the lid overlay. And that will be this object. And then again, I think I want to make this pure white and then tint it the correct color so that we can reuse this image. And then also, while we're here, we're gonna make sure that is the right dimensions, and it is. Okay, now this thing can go full transparency, and we want to line that up somewhere around here, and then just round these values off. Not quite. Oh, we need to resize 7288. Okay. And then if we tint that the same background color and then alpha down, well, we're not going to see anything because there's no other elements in place yet. Okay, so then let's get some of those other pieces. Start with this radial piece. This thing is supposed to be 26 by 10, and it is going to be not tinted in any way. I think I may have nailed the position of that one. Ooh, not exactly. 2610, it is the right size, but there are a couple of pixels missing. Okay. That should be an easy fix. I should be able to handle that. Skip uploading all of them, or updating all of them. It looks like it is on the second rise here, here, and here. Better, fixed. And this is going to be MP pip 1. We can do some tinting or something to indicate that it is offline. I'll figure that out later. So then this can be pip 2, which is going to need to be 22 by 21. Oh, these are also not... Some of these are not canvassed correctly. Okay, skip. one's fine. That one's fine. This one is not. 22, save that. And that one's okay. Alright. Also, I've noticed something funny, which is that they go in kind of reverse. So this one should have the same height and dimensions. So we'll copy like so. This one needs to be up a little bit. Interesting. Need to update the height. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so then this one becomes pip 2. This is pip 6. This one should be a mirror version of pip 5. Alright, and then we gotta just line it up. Somewhere in that ballpark. Good. Alright, pip 3. 1022. And that'll be 3, and then we'll copy this one to be 4. Okay, that is all the pips. Let's create a empty parent for all of them. Don't like that it's adding rounding points to some of this stuff, and I don't seem to be able to remove it. I do want them parented just for organization, so I'll accept it. We'll see if it causes problems. And then in here, we need this overlay to be the last thing in the list, and we can bring that down, and that's giving the sense that these are turning on, hopefully. It'll feel better when it's actually animating. Alright, continuing with the setup. Next up, we need the health bar, so we'll copy one of these. Health bar green. This one is even, no problems there, so we'll drag that into this part. We're going to set the dimensions of it. Uh, 7256. Now this one is one that doesn't have a frame, something me and Trixie realized at the very end, but I think it should just line up perfectly here. Okay. And this becomes the HP health bar. This needs to be fill horizontal. No, vertical. One is full. Zero's all the way at the bottom. Okay. Then we need the health bar background, which should be simple and is just a gray version. Good. Happy with that. And then gonna double check the overlay again. That should darken. Yeah, I think this will look better when we get a frame on the health bar itself. But for now, that's gonna work. I think we don't need any of these pieces anymore. I'm just gonna turn them off for now. I want a second version of this. the bright version. This is the bright version. This one will be pure white. And this allows us to overshoot a little bit. Also, that reminds me there is one more piece which is more aesthetic, but maybe we'll find a purpose for it eventually. But Trixie liked this gem, which is odd. So we'll need to adjust that to have a height of 8. Save that back out. Can just minimize. And then this thing becomes 8, 8, and gets positioned right here in the middle. Nailed the positioning, no need to round. Gem. Nope, that's game. Good try, game. Nope, good try, brain. All right, we got there. So this thing, I don't have a purpose for it this time, but like we could like have this thing fill and it be like an ultimate meter or something, or I don't know. It can have a mechanical purpose at some point. For now, it is purely decorative. And so if we go back into the bright version... Oh. Doesn't line up perfectly. 7288. That is the correct size. I'm going to guess that's because we shifted it. Oh, it's not... Oh, I just got the position wrong. It's supposed to be down slightly. Okay. I'm also noticing a little bit of weirdness here. I'm going to guess the overlay is just missing a pixel. Yeah, I'm going to say it's missing a pixel. So we'll go into this version of the image, and we're going to add an extra pixel somewhere. Where is that? Down 1, 2, 3, 4 steps right here. Good. That all looks to be lining up perfectly. All right, last pieces here. We need the text. That can be more centered. I think we want it on the 0.5 here. Should be able to fit. Ooh, doesn't actually fit. Would triple or quadruple 0 be the biggest we can get then for our font? Close to it. That's working okay-ish. Would it be better if I did 39.5? Yeah, it's just barely fitting. We might need to make this a little bit wider. It's already kind of squished, though. Okay, we'll make do. 1008. Sure. We'll leave that as default text. We also need the health information. That technically used to live inside of the... Oh, it's like a status component, I think, technically speaking. It's under combat base. But it's not a prefab, it's just one that I've broken out. Let's steal the health text from here. And let's go back. Clock display. So these need to be above everything, but below the overlays. Oh, I also want to do this here so that the sizing is easier or better. Something about the canvas is set up in a better way this way. We'll do 39.5 seems fine. Trying to figure out how I want to position this. Should this be bottom aligned? It's basically 1 pixel off the bottom, essentially. So I'd want to line this up the same way. Because this is 16 point, it's not quite working out. I'd need to like overshoot a little bit to get it to be on the same kind of line between the two of these. Yeah, it looks like about there would get it to be lined up. And then is this centered? No, it's left aligned, so if I add more digits, we're not going to overlap. I want to see, how did this look when Drixie did the mock-up. Yeah, broadly about the same. My HP is maybe a little more to the left, but it is giving us room for all of our font. Because I think the worst we'll get to is probably that. And that's all fitting. So that should be okay. If anything, maybe we want to move this over a little bit more. Can we, let's get rid of these gizmos. The giant T is definitely making it hard to see. Oh, I didn't see the comment. Well, Mr. Warhammer dude, if you ever come back here, which I doubt, I appreciate leaving the comment and stopping by. Okay, so I think this is good. We could try and anchor this a little bit by adding the colon. Does that make this look better or worse? I think it's a little better. And then if we go back to kind of smaller numbers again, that's fine. It would feel better, I think, if it was centered. But if it's centered, then this isn't going to work when the numbers get really big. Yeah, they'd go off the side. I mean, we could do like adjustments based off of font size, so that when we have small numbers, it's like centered here. And then when we add digits, that's fine. But when we add 9, we like just shift everything over a little bit. But as you gain and lose health, that means it's going to move. So that can't work. So is there a better way to do this? Don't really want to drop the size of the font, because we could do something like that and then just like put it in the middle. I guess that's an idea. What happens if we do back up to 16? What if we do center align text, put it in the middle, and then grab the HP value and like bring it up somewhere like here? We can't go any smaller with this text. This is basically as small as our font goes. Hydrate from Silent Noodles. Appreciate the hydrate. Let me redeem that. Okay. And this health bar is also going to go up and down. So as this health bar goes down, I guess that isn't the worst. I'll say I don't love it. It's possible that I can work with Trixie though to try and like set up some sort of like anchor point to make this feel less weird when it's off to the left. Like if we put like a little bar around this and like nestle the HP into some sort of small frame, this could work. Don't want to overlap it with anything, I don't think. All right. If we get rid of the colon, still too tight. We can overlap it a little bit, but I don't... Yeah, no, that looks weird. Actually, last thing, let's just see, would this even work if the HP value was smaller? I didn't try that. What if we go down to like 60 or 600? 77 1 0. You know what? I don't hate it. Yeah, okay. Let's go with this. That'll be the positioning of our text. I think that is all of the layout stuff figured out. I'm gonna double check to see how the overlays feel. Oh, this overlay isn't gonna work because it's not covering the center. Oh, keep that the same value. So that means that we will need to separately bring this text up. Hmm. Or we fill in the center. Does this one work okay on this side? It does, but I kind of don't like the text being there, so I actually think I do want the text to fade up on its own separately. Yeah, I think that'll look better with the text fading up. Okay, we gotta build some tech now. Let's write some scripts. So how does this work? This is the thing that's controlling the fill meter bar. That's now gonna be this one instead. We're also going to need to add the functionality from the combat screens. So this is a unit data with a stat. Fill completion bar. And a stat text component, which is doing HP from the HP stat. Okay. So I think we just need to grab that same functionality. So we're going to add a unit component. Data-driven parent component. We're going to add a stat image. Percent fill. Between HP and max HP, fill the progress bar, not the progress bar background. And then we're also going to do stat text component, which is going to update this HP amount text based off the HP stat with no separator or prefix in front of it, because we're handling that separately here as a different object. Cool. Code-wise, that should mostly work. Out of curiosity, I think I can do a stat image component, toggle image component. I messed up 3, 4, 5, and 6 in here. Now this can't let me choose which stat I'm working on. It looks like this is built hard-coded to work with MP. That seems a bit silly. I'm gonna try this because I'm curious to see what this does. But I think because this is also a stat-driven component, it should work for free. These are all unit-based, right? Yeah, they're all unit data structures. Okay, so this won't handle any of the animation, but the data at the very least should work. We're going to change this to, instead of doing this component, which is stat bar component bracket 1 bracket. So instead of pointing at this guy, we're going to remove that reference. We're going to disable this object and the backing bar. And the player tutorial stuff is going to be done a little differently. Then inside of this screen, we will reference the clock display. And it should now update the information correctly. We're going to go continue. Continue. Here, yes. Search for the clock. Animate it open. Yeah, that's working. Let's maximize. So this being based off MP is no longer correct because MP is used as our like action point system. So I guess it kind of works for like when we're in combat because it shows how many action points we have left, similar to this bar here. But I think long term I'd like it to do something else. Yeah, and our HP dropped. Okay. Right, and we still haven't hooked up that room to have the fog. I'm going to do that real quick so that we can go into further combat. TO2. Copy the fog volume and fog manager into TO3. And we will have the board point to fog volume. And now this room should also work with the fog system. Kind of. Does this one not have a directional light? It does. Just need to assign it. Okay. Oh, interesting. This is my first time going down with the fog system. Cool. I think I want to continue adjusting those settings, but that's good for now. Let's go back to testing. So what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to have the watch open and then fade up. So we're going to have to do a bunch of animation work to make that happen. How do we want to handle that? Because we're going to load into a screen. None of this should be here yet, so this all needs to be turned off. Technically, as I move between screens, I think it should all stay here. I don't think the clock should like open and close as we enter and exit rooms. So it's just on initial launch. More accurately, in the true flow of the game, it's going to be when we go to a goddess realm and then start a new run. Right, because this is going to be based off of like the return animation stuff. So when we finish a run, the cloud comes over. We should probably have it so hero actually collapses and dies. This closes up during that animation, and then the cloud comes across. But we're gonna need to make sure that stuff happens quickly so that the player isn't just like annoyed every time the death animation happens. It needs to feel good, not bad, obviously. Needs to be an event. Alright, well, for now, let's figure out if we can just get the clock turning on and off, and then we'll figure out about how to control it later. I'm also going to update the stats component. We're going to give this a specific stat that we want to focus on. Public stat types. Sure. And this will default to MP for anything that was previously using it. But this will allow us to change it to point at something else. How does MP change work? That's part of the reason it's hard-coded. Because it previews how your HP or your MP is going to be modified in the next few turns. Okay. So this will work, but it won't have the full set of functionality that it's supposed to. I don't know what counter is. We'll just leave it. It's an old stat. Shouldn't be hooked up to anything and should be 0, which means we should see 0 pips. If not, I can just turn off that component if this doesn't work the way I think it should. Yeah, it's fine. They're just darkened off, which will look better when darkened out as if they're turned off is what I mean. And they should look okay when the frame's around them. Okay. Having them pure black is probably a little too extreme. Could also give it a color that we want to tint them. Let's worry about that later. For now, how do we animate this thing? We're going to need an open and close animation. In the past, we've had UI drive that type of thing. I think it's going to make sense again here to do something like that. Let's copy this component. Clock sequence component. And we're going to have this thing drive its opening and closing, essentially. Let's assume the clock state has some sort of value for whether or not it's open or closed. Why did none of these have M underscore, which is my standard naming convention? Okay. So this will be open close. And we'll have to find a moment when it makes sense to call this. This plays a cutscene. Both of these are what I'm looking for. When we do this, can we do... This is a bit hacky, but I just want to see it functioning. So when we run out of time or on player death, we're going to say that the clock state is closed. And then on checkpoint screen, this is not the right moment when we need this, but we're going to do it here for the time being. We're going to say that when we transition on submit in this screen, we will also say that the clock state is now open again. So this should be like 2 different spots where it'll turn on and off. So now that we know that, again, this is not a great way of doing it, but we're going to leave the continuous update on, and we're going to have an internal value for the old state and the new state. So public bool current open state which will be false by default. Great. And then the refresh is going to check if the current state does not equal the stored data dot open, or more accurately, what we should probably do is just a return. So if they're equal, return. If stored data dot open is true, we're going to do one set of code, else we're going to do a different set of code. We're going to play the open animation, or we're going to play the close. Okay. We will also add a animating bool in here. And if we play open or close, we're going to set that to true. And then when we're done, we will set it to false. It'll be a little more complicated than that, but we'll start there. Okay. And if we are animating, we're just going to leave. Don't refresh if we're animating. That's the basic logic. Now we need to write the actual effects here. So let's look at hit component, which is another screen component that does some sequence stuff. Pretty simple. Set up a series of steps. It's debatable whether or not this needs to be a public list, but I see why I did it. It requires less initialization of code. We don't have to initialize the list, but it's slightly unnecessary. We still have to do it here anyways, because we're clearing it. Yeah, I think that's just weird. Whatever, I'm going to keep the same setup. Maybe past told he knew something that I don't know. So this is just doing some UI transition stuff. Nothing major here. Doing some allocations. Okay, so when the final step we're going to say is we're no longer animating, which will allow us to play new animations. All this other stuff mostly doesn't matter. Yeah. We're not going to worry about copy and pasting between close and open until we're done. So, last thing we're going to do is set animating to false. I guess the biggest thing we need to do is do the animation. So we're going to need to do an animation parameter sequence step, which is going to take a, oh, there's a number of different things it can take. Surprisingly not an animator. Surprised it takes Oh. Got it. So this is bad naming on my part. There's a Unity component class that's called animation, which is dumb that I also named one animation as well. But ours is specific to character controllers. So this sequence controller, this animation parameter is designed to work with an animation component, not with the animator directly. There's actually a number of good reasons why we do it that way. The question is, can a UI operate the same way as a character? And I don't know. So if we add an animation, what does that need to exist? Well, it needs an animation event. It needs a sprite renderer. Really? For setting transparent materials. Okay, that's kind of a secondary function, not a primary function of this thing. Debatably should be maybe separated out into a different class. Top anchor, bottom anchor, tween object. Most of this other stuff I think doesn't matter. I'm going to double check though. So this is the heart of it, which is actually modifying the animator, setting floats and triggers. What is this top anchor doing? No, literally nothing. What is the bottom anchor doing? Literally nothing. Good talk. Tween object. Well, these are public. It could be that they're used elsewhere. Nope, no references. Bottom anchor is used as part of some aligning to the unit system. Okay, fair. Probably top anchor was originally built to do the same thing. This get tween object literally is just passing that object out, so it's just a way of other things getting references. It's kind of lame. And then we already looked at the transparency stuff. Okay. So as long as I don't want any of those other variables, it should be fine to leave them unset. This is now potentially on my short list of things I'd like to refactor, because I don't think any of this stuff should live inside of this animation script if its real purpose is just to be able to communicate with the animator. But that should be okay. This should be fine, he says without very much confidence. Okay, so now we should be able to do... Oh, this should be private. I don't want to modify this or this from the... Oh, I bet you I made this public so that I could see the sequence steps that had been instantiated at runtime. That's what that's about. Okay, here we're going to have a reference to an animation, which will be the UI piece that's opening and closing, and then we can pass that animation into here, but it's like surprisingly one of the last things we're doing. So we're going to do a trigger. The parameter name we're triggering is... Good question. Anim2 or Anim2 reverse, which is the opening and closing. Somewhat generic, but we don't always know what our animations are going to be, and we generate these things from sprite files. So we have to have somewhat generic names for things that aren't the characters, because they're preset parameters. Anim2. Then we need a float parameter. I think we want true. And I don't think we care about the duration in this situation. There isn't a version of the constructor that doesn't take a duration. Does duration get ignored regardless if it's a trigger type? Yeah. If it's a trigger type, we never actually look at the duration at all. Interesting. Okay. So it can just be 0. I think that'll just cause it to open and close correctly. Now we have to do a bunch of other work. Once the watch is opened, we need to turn on the elements by fading down the overlay pieces. So this is going to be a game object reference. This is going to be lid overlay. And this is going to be watch overlay. And then we need a bright version of each of these as well, because I'm being fancy. Okay, so if we are now have the watch open. Oh, we don't have the watch open here. All we know is that we've triggered the animation. We need to wait until the animation is done. Okay, that means we want to have end on animation complete set. Frustrating. Okay. This sequence step has gotten a little too big. Or a little too unwieldy. I think... What are the spots where this is referenced? Oh, we set it to false. So wait, end on animation complete is true by default? But blocking is false by default. Good talk. Okay, trying to think through the ramifications of any changes I make here that might impact the rest of our entire combat system. The problem is, it seems like this thing by default doesn't wait. It says, play the animation, I don't care, I'm moving on. That's what this non-blocking is saying. Because it's false, whenever we modify an animation parameter and trigger an animation to play, we never wait for that animation to finish. We just let it go. I think this will default it to true as part of the initialization for it. An inline constructor, basically, being tacked onto the existing constructor. So this will make it blocking. So if we were to, for example, add a print sequence step and give it a message of start anim and end anim, we should see that there is some amount of time between these calls as it opens and closes. We are going to make this current open state a bool so that we can, essentially by toggling this, we'll be able to see at least one half of it as it changes for debugging purposes. And then let's not worry about the enabling system yet. Where'd Unity go? All right. Do we have everything hooked up here? No, we need to add the clock. Oh, it's mad. Right. Sure. Okay, now I can add the clock sequence component. That's going to need a reference to the animation. There. The stopwatch overlay, the bright version of the stopwatch overlay, the lid overlay, and the bright version. And we will set that continuously updating. And it shouldn't need this text anymore. We'll re-add the text stuff if we need to re-add the text. Oh, we are down the rabbit hole today. Okay, continue. Let's go here. Clock display. Well, that didn't work. How am I gonna test this easily? Because I basically just want to hit a button and have it open and close the clock face, basically. Drixie with the hydrate. We're done. Bought our first bottle of water. Let's go get the second. All right. Clear. Let's try this again. We're going to add some breakpoints and we're going to debug through it and see if we can figure out what's going on. Debug, attach debugger. We're going to see if we can hit the play or close at the very least. Okay, so nothing's hit by default. Are we at least hitting this part of the code? Yes. And we can see that the clock state says that we're currently closed, which it believes we are. So that's honestly probably not too far off what we actually want to happen. We probably want to default to closed, and we'll want to set all of this to be off by default, essentially. We're not going to get past here, though. I don't believe. No. Okay, so we can get rid of this breakpoint. And then in here, let's toggle clock display. Let's toggle the state here, and we'll get to this point. We'll set it to false. So we're going to try and play the close variation. Oh, you know what would help? You know what would help a whole bunch? So if we actually play the actual sequence that we're setting up. Oh, is that the other reason why this is public? Yeah, because it's managed and handled by the actual combat system. That all gets generated by that component, but it gets passed over to the actual combat system to say, hey, while we're displaying this UI, don't move or don't do anything until this text is out of the way. I mean, technically speaking, we don't actually wait on the text, but still, it's handed over. So that's why the sequence steps are public there, and why that wasn't being launched directly inside. We're gonna do the same thing here as well. Okay, and in case we've lost the plot, all we're trying to do here is just test to see whether or not the inline blocking that we've added is going to actually cause this sequence step to wait a little bit before printing the end anim statement. I believe this has the frame counter baked into it, so we should expect that they're on different frames. If that blocking is not set up correctly, then it's going to play start and end on the same frame, or print the text start and end on the same frame. If it is blocking, then we can move on to, you know, essentially assuming that we're in a good state to start highlighting and enabling pieces of components. Okay, so come into here, clock, display. We're going to clear the console. We're going to get into here. Interesting. So that's the bad result. So it was a 1 frame difference, but I would expect this waited longer than 1 frame. Did it even play any animation? Hard to say. Let's get rid of the breakpoint so we can see. Please stop. Okay, so it is playing the animation. So the actual ask to be like, can you please play this animation to reverse? It is doing that correctly. The problem is it's not waiting for the animation to be done. If type is trigger, which I believe is what we've set. Yeah. Then we should wait on animation complete. Given the entity ID name. Oh, but we didn't pass in an entity, we passed in an animation. I wonder if this is the cause of several other bugs that I've had. This might cause a bunch of problems. Yeah, this thing is getting... It's become unwieldy. Especially as we start branching out and using this animation system for stuff other than just the characters. So we're going to make this change, which I think is generally a good idea. So it was using the entity ID to say, hey, wait until this entity ID gets an animation complete. But because we have no entity ID given, we'd probably get in here with no animation and we'd fail unless we set the entity ID at some point based off the animation given, and we don't. Okay, so at this point we should have already used that entity ID to find an animation component, so it should be very reasonable at this point to construct the wait on animation sequence step with that animation we've already found. Yeah, okay, good. I'm going to stop and restart one more time. This should fix it. I have very scary implications that this means that other trigger animations, like our attacks, for example, may have been broken on wait, and I didn't even know it. So I may find other bugs now where things are taking too long because it's waiting correctly when it wouldn't have been waiting before. Clock, display, console, clear. That looks about right to me. Approximately like 24 frames to open. I don't know what our exact frame rate is on this thing. I don't have it open anymore, but I'm going to assume that it's relatively short. Yeah, 24 frames seems kind of close at the very least. So let's assume now that when we play open, this is properly waiting for the animation to finish. Once the animation is done, then we can start turning some objects on. So we're going to need to turn on a number of things. Maybe we want to reparent some of this stuff a little differently with this in mind. Oh, did it take so long to hit stop that I hit play again? Yeah, I did. Okay, stop for real. Clock. Display. I think... I want to do this in the front end scene. So when this thing is closed, can we expect all of this should be disabled? I'm going to assume yes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put all of this under a parent component, which has some awful positioning. Okay, so we're going to create an empty parent component under here. And we're going to have it be the identical size. Still not what I wanted. Create empty component underneath. And we will have it be identical in size to the piece above it. So that there's no kind of manipulation or changing of the values, hopefully. The positions for all the components should remain the same. We're going to call this stopwatch content. We're going to put all of this under here. And this can all be off and disabled. And so we can say that all of that is turned off by default, and we'll turn it on as part of opening. So we'll wait for the animation to open. Once the animation's open, we're going to turn the clock on. Once it's turned on, we can assume that all of these are on by default, but have 0 alpha. So let's do this one at a time just to make sure. So this is here. I hate that this added a 2. Why? Why did you round and add a 2 here? Just because I added an extra parent component? No, they all still have it. Or a good chunk of them anyways. That's so annoying. Like, what is this? Well, that might actually just be me putting that in a bad spot. Okay, so let's bring this down. 0 alpha. Okay. Now this one should be the same color as the background. It should also have 0 alpha to start, I think. Because we assume everything is in a closed state when we begin the game. I think that's the assumption we're going to move with. So these are all both alpha down, but they are turned on. They exist. They just have no alpha associated with them. I think in the default state, this is also going to have 0 alpha, and this is also going to have 0 alpha. Technically, to save myself a little bit of time, what I can do is I can have both of these turned on, but we can make another empty component to put them both under. Create empty. Text fade parent. And we can give this a group, canvas group component. And we'll put these pieces of text as well as the remaining text underneath here. And now we can fade both sets on and off just by changing this one value here. Okay, so this will be 0 to start with as well. So this will be 0, 0. These ones should also be on, but 0 alpha to begin with. The frame should exist. The bar should exist. Actually, these should be on by default. Really? There we go. That's the mistake. Okay. Same thing with this one. By default, when we first load up, if this thing's supposed to be closed, this should be on by default. Okay. So when we start the game, we should expect it's in this state. It then animates itself open. Once it's open, it turns this piece on. once these things are on, both this one and this one are going to fade down. From 100 alpha down to 0. Okay, let's do that next. Okay. Content goes here. So we turn the content on. Then we're going to want to do a UI fade. Ooh, probably fade sequence step. Takes a canvas group. Actually, that makes sense to me. So in the same way that we parented the text, we probably also want to do something similar here. So we're going to make a couple variations of these. We're going to make the overlay fade parent and the overlay bright fade parent. The text is going to go under this one. The dark frames are going to go under this one, and the bright frames are going to go under this one. Okay. Now, inside of here, instead of having references to these things, we're going to have references to the canvas groups. And we're going to have the overlay group. We're going to have the overlay bright group. And we're going to have the text. Maybe we add group to the back of this so it's more clear that this is a canvas group. I'm not going to add canvas group because it's slightly longer than it needs to be. Okay, so we need to have an end position for the fade. So we're fading down on the overlay group over some amount of time. We'll say like 0.5 seconds. Half a second should be fine for now. And we will make this blocking. Then we're going to do a bright group, which is going to go to 0.25. Over a quarter of a second, blocking. And then it's going to go back down to 0. So it's essentially overshooting, getting really bright, and then over a quarter of a second going back down again. Somewhere in here, I think we can also turn on the text. So we can do the text group, and we can fade that up to 1. It should be 0 by default. Over 0.35, and we'll make that non-blocking so that the text fades up at the same time that the bright happens. I don't know if that's going to look okay, but we'll give it a shot. Okay, default behavior. So this one is going to need to be at 0. This one is going to need to be at 1. And this one is going to need to be at 0. Perfect. Let's hook those up here. So text group goes there. Overlay group goes here, and overlay bright goes here. Add an auto deactivate component, which will just turn this off if it happens to be on to start. This should allow us to test the opening. Let's give that a try. Is that everything? That might be everything we need to do. Because we just need to fade everything up. And fade everything down, yada yada yada. But essentially this should work? Question mark? Everything did not deactivate the way I expected it to. This should have auto-deactivated, so it should have been off by default. Okay, well, let's see what happens when we tick the button. So we're gonna say, hey, go to the off state. I mean, that kind of worked. It did turn on this piece, but I didn't really see the fades at all. Maybe just a little too fast. Let's slow things down drastically just to see if we can... see what's going on here. Yeah, this should be the second. So let's make this like 10 seconds for each of these. Just really extreme so we can see it. I think I may have been overdoing it a little bit with the initial speed, because I want it to be fast, but I feel like that's probably too much. Okay. Drixie also redeemed a stretch. I can stand. I can do a stand. Alright. So why are you not turning off is like one question. Okay. Let's toggle this. No, that's definitely just popping on. So the fades are not working correctly. Not working correctly at all. Default, this is 0. Default, this is 1. Default, this is 0. So, okay. It, by default... Ooh, good question I just thought of. Is it playing the animation before we actually toggle it? No. Okay. Or I had a good thought, but my thought was wrong. These are all pointing at the right things. wondering if something in the screen is doing something to these components. No, none of that should matter. Interesting. Oh, interesting. Maybe I'm not adding enough parameters? Default starting alpha should be fine. Because that should use whatever the alpha was to begin with. Yeah, this all seems okay. Still also a little weirded out that this isn't doing anything. It's a pretty simple script. Let's give this another shot. Interesting. Currently animating is already true. Well, it was at least in the correct state this time. Let's put some breakpoints in and try and figure out what's happening. Because I'm a little bit at a loss. Animating should definitely be false. Let's see if it's somehow getting into one of these early. It is. When we initialize the data for the very first time, somehow it's already getting in here. So the fades have already been activated before we got there. Okay, so I was right. I'm surprised we didn't see any prints in the console because I removed them. We'll just leave those there for now. Okay, so I've just set up something incorrectly here. I thought if our current state should be true, and the state says we're true, we should just return and we shouldn't get in here until we untoggle it. Untoggle it? Until we toggle it off? Our current state is false. Interesting, to say the least. It's definitely not... Maybe it is. Okay. Weird. I thought for sure I had ticked that box. Well, it's definitely taking its time now. Okay, so what's happening there was because we toggled it off, it gets toggled on and then gets turned off immediately by the auto deactivator. So we need to have it on by default in order for it to be in the correct state. It's fine. I think it'll work now. So all of that back and forth was just the fact that I thought I had ticked this box, but apparently I hadn't. I mean, that worked. I didn't see the white. It was animating, so I guess it just wasn't a high enough number. No, these need to be default up by default now because we're not handling the alpha. We're handling the alpha here instead of on the image. Okay, so that's why we didn't see those ones. These ones are on by default. Okay, so that should be fine. Let's make that change in the prefab. Just change the color of the alpha all the way up. Okay, and now that we've validated that it's actually happening, we can remove the 10-second part here and see how it feels with some faster animations. And then we'll have to figure out how to do this in reverse for closing it. It should be honestly the steps backwards. Let's give that a shot. All right, continue. Save slot number 2. Loading in. Finding the clock display, toggling it on. Okay. This fell too fast. Let's make this 1 second for both of the fade up and fades down, just so I can better see what's happening there. But I think this is close. This is really close. Continue. Yeah, that's better. Let's try something like that. See if these numbers feel a little better. I think it is functional at this point. We've got it working. We're gonna need to make sure that actually like entering and exiting the goddess realm opens and closes it. It's not gonna be perfect because the places I've placed the code is not great, but it should be good enough to at least see. I don't like the white glow. It's not really working the way I had hoped it would. I was hoping it would feel like it's like, you know, oversaturating, but it just kind of isn't working. Could be a color thing, like maybe it shouldn't be pure white. .5 feels too intense now. Just make it faster so it'll be more subtle. Okay. Yeah, I think the effect needs to be all around quicker. It needs to, if it's going to feel like it's popping, it needs to fade much quicker. Agreed. Agreed, Drixie. Okay. Just really snappy. Like pop up and then fade back down real quick. Yeah. Meanwhile, the text is going to start fading on after it reaches full opacity. That part I think could also be tweaked when the text turns on, is maybe a little different. We're not adding glitter. Okay. I mean, we could add like a like intense like effect of some kind. Like some sort of glow or ring behind it. Sun rays. That's better. I think the text is a little too slow now. Let's try that. And then I'm going to leave it. We're going to go backwards. Yeah, like the Omni Weapon glow. If we had something like that behind it, it could work, but it's so far in the corner, I don't know if I really want to add much more to it. We'd have to add it as like additional UI animations too, which I guess we now have set up to more easily do. We're gonna leave it there for now. Let's do that in reverse. So we're going to glow and then go down. Then we're going to do text group down to 0. Then we're going to turn the overlay back on. We're going to then turn off all the content stuff. This needs to happen first. The timing on some of these might be a little bit different going in reverse. And then we play the animation once the content is false. Yeah, that should be the same thing in reverse. Yep. That's opening and closing, all right. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. Again, the timing of when it happens, I think, is a little bit off. There's some general animation issues with stuff. Like the Goddess Realm popping in and out is a little weird. There's also some fog issues too. Fog appearing and then clearing is kind of weird. Those will all be handled though. We'll figure those out in time. Okay. But that's the UI shutting and opening. There's maybe some sound effect work we could do for this as well. I'll do that off camera because some of the sound effects need like a lot of changing in order to make them like they need some volume adjustments, and I don't want to mess people's ears. But we could get some sound effects going. I think that's working out pretty much exactly how I thought it would. The white flash is maybe the part that I'm still not sold on. It just doesn't look good. And again, like Trixie said, it might be a color thing. If we tweak it from pure white, maybe it needs to be somewhere in like a gray tone or something, so it goes we'll figure it out. Cool, so we can open and close it pretty much at will just by setting a value inside of the clock's current state. When we set that to true and false is going to be the big question. I think it probably makes the most sense on the moment when we animate in, when we like transition into the world, we probably want to open it. It's not going to be art. It's going to be design data. Sequences. Custom room transitions? No. Screen transitions? No. Is it just a cutscene? These are the out of time ones. Isn't it an ability? Yeah, it's a transition. Lightning enter transition. So when we lightning bolt into a scene, We probably want to open the clock at this moment. Yeah, we'll have to write a new step in here. Probably at the same time as when we're getting up. Call this run start ability effect. Just write a lambda. I'm still not 100% positive this is the final way of doing this either. Checkpoint. I think this is a bit of a hack still, but I think it's a better hack. It's still a hack. Required flag. This is for a component. Do we have a required flag inside of an ability effect yet? Kind of, for whether or not we can target. Should still be essentially the same thing. I feel like this should maybe be a conditional property component, but it's not really a property, it's like a different type of conditional. Okay. So what this will let me do is I can have it so that it will turn on the clock as long as a specific flag is true. If any of the required flags are not valid, we return and we never actually add this sequence step to the get up sequence. I think that's reasonable. So then, for a required flag, we can add a required flag that we have done the tutorial, essentially. So inside of combat base, this flag must be complete. This player status tutorial. Which would open the, or reveal the status HUD before. Now it's going to gate whether or not we open the watch right away. So it requires that that be true in order for this to be run. And then on one of our other cutscenes for the forest, TO1 clock tutorial, in here we set player status tutorial complete. So this is the moment when we should trigger that. Yeah, we want to open the clock at this moment. Huh. That's lame. Not too difficult, but what that means is we can't just use an action sequence step here. We're gonna have to make a new sequence step for this. Perfect. This should actually be open watch. So, next problem. I kind of want this to delay until the watch is open. It's not a great way to do that. Yeah, for the sake of right now, what we'll do is we will just add a... These are blocking by default. So we will just do a yield return new wait for seconds. And we're just going to hard code the amount of time that we think the clock takes to open. And I will maybe think about finding a way to get this information to the sequence step, but it would not be my favorite thing. The easiest way would be to pilot it through the clock state, but it's only ever going to really be needed for this one specific moment. If we ever find that we need way more situations like this, then we'll look at actually setting it up properly. Okay, let's give that a shot. So now the clock should close when we end a run, and it should open when we come back in to start a new run. And realistically, we shouldn't even see the initial cutscene. How do we handle loading? That's a different situation where we'll need to turn the clock on. Well, I guess we'll figure that out in a second. So it should open after the lightning strike. Yeah, that's working. Everything's a little broken though. This might be all related to do with the trigger animation thing we fixed. Yeah, like why is Hero taking so long to stand back up again? Oh no, I know why that is. That's because we added the shield wait time. So that's also happening on the initial load. Yeah. This is probably the easiest way to deal with that. Okay. Next problem. How do we get it to open when we load a save? Because right now it's loading as part of transitioning in. From a lightning strike. But in this situation, we're starting a new game and loading in from an existing map. Oh, actually, the state should be saved. Yeah, so if we come in here, this might be because we have an old save. And we walk down here, transition to the next room. We should have created an autosave. And now if we load up that autosave, I think it'll set the clock to open. The question is, does it open it while the cloud cover is happening? So this is from a few moments ago. No. Current state, it thinks it's open. Oh. Is this because clock state, this should be off by default, is our assumption, because we start the game, a new game, with it off. And then inside of the prefab, we should also assume it's off by default here. So now when we load the game, it'll say it's true, but it's off by default. So when we continue this autosave, now it should open. Ooh, interesting. So yes, it ran through the sequence to open it, but it was not able to load the animation at that moment. Ooh, we didn't get the... print statements either. Start animation, that's why. There was a start animation call from the clock sequence component. Okay, so yeah, it called open on it, but it was unable to animate at that time? How odd. What does it currently look like? So if we click here, open it up, and click on the background, it's currently in animation 1 looping. What is the... Interesting. It should have hit this in the cloud cover, but it didn't. Oh, we should be able to check, though, set trigger. Okay. This should be checkable. Was it because the animation was, like, the object was turned off? Okay, so it now thinks it's true. So it's going to start doing the animation work. It's as soon as the cloud cover is fully over, it's going to come in here and it's going to start animating open. Now it's going to come into this object. It's going to try and set up this sequence. We're going to add a breakpoint here. It's doing all the good work. Okay, now we're inside of the animation parameter. It found the animation. We'll make sure this is the right one. It is the stopwatch background. It is doing a trigger. I think this failed. Can I see? Yeah, parameters is 0. So it's trying to get the parameters out, but it's failing. This is like some weird stuff about my animation system. I need to like figure all this stuff out at runtime. This is because I guarantee this is because the animator is off. We're gonna loop through all of these issues and the animator just hasn't been turned on yet. It hasn't been active, and because it's not active, it hasn't started, and because it hasn't started, it's not in a good state. This will cause so many other problems. All right, let's validate what I think is happening. I believe that because we're modifying or trying to modify the animation before the clock display is turned on, that this animator isn't set up correctly yet. And the moment that we try to do this autosave here, it's still not set up correctly. This is part of the animation for the units. We can skip that. Okay, now we're in here. We're trying to play the opening of the HUD, the clock piece. We're going to try and get into here. Just make sure we're on the right animation. This is the stopwatch. We're going to come into here. We're going to try and get the parameter information, but parameters is empty. We're going to check to see the animator.parameter count, and it is also empty. So we're not going to get in here and we're not going to do anything. So the animator has not been set up yet. Meanwhile, a moment later, it has been. Bane of my existence. So how do I force that animator to update while it's turned off? Do we be super lazy? So there's a super lazy solution in here, which is that we just do steps dot add new end of frame sequence step, which just waits until the end of the frame before we progress. And that means there'll be a 1 frame delay before this animation will start, but there's a good chance that'll give time for the animation controller to turn on initialize before we start trying to activate it. It is my least favorite way of handling these types of problems, but oftentimes it mostly just works. Until weeks later I find out that it has other problems. Did I do slot 2 or did I do the autosave? I don't remember. Yeah, that just fixes it. And it just is open when we come through because the save state had it saved as open. So it's open. That means also, we should check if we go to the Goddess Realm, which should autosave as part of entering the Goddess Realm. It should be closed. And then if we come back in, load that autosave, it should be closed here. It is. And if we go do a run, we'll lightning strike, and then it opens up. Okay. I think that is the HUD handled. It's not exactly how I'd like it to be set up, but for the most part, it is functional. Let's get into some combat and make sure that's working as well. Okay, and that's basically as far as we can go. I guess we can go back and fight the other slime in this previous room again. Just move back and forth fighting slimes. I can kite him forever, but I'm kind of curious to see what happens when we die. Okay, so our health and stuff reset at the same moment when we closed it. We might want to move the health resetting stuff to this moment. The health didn't, or the time didn't show up until after we took a step too. Okay. I think the art needs another pass, but I think in terms of functionality, this is working. And this should be good enough for Drixie to be able to come in and like actually see the art in-game, edit it in-game, and be able to get a good understanding. I feel like that health drop should also be an animation as well. Right now it just snaps down. I feel like that could be draining or filling. Does the miasma disappear when we do the exposure post-process effect? It's not going to do it again. Ooh, the game broke actually. Animator problems. Okay. Oh, we left the scene immediately upon entering it, and that causes some problems because the AI is queuing up some actions. We need to find a way to clear the AI out so that they're not trying to do stuff while we're transitioning out. Just some cleanup problems with switching between rooms. That's fine. Cool. Where are we at on time? 2.5 hours. We probably should stop and get some food. Yeah. That's probably a reasonable thing to do. Yeah, and so this one's not closing or not opening because it's just a bad save now. Which I'm not worried about saves that are kind of broken because this isn't out in the world. And even for the demo, I'm probably not going to be super concerned about save integrity. Probably want to voice that somewhere on the front page. Your save is not guaranteed to work. This is a demo. It's not more than 15-30 minutes long. I'm sorry. Yeah. I think I'd like to work on some of that timing for the death animation so that the clock has a little bit of time to close before the clouds come across. And we should also have Hero do like a death animation as well. I'm liking the stand-up though. The clock opening as Hero stands up I think is perfectly fine. We could maybe move it to be after that animation, but not super concerned about that part of it. Cool. So we've got this UI hooked up. We did all the placement, pixel precision of all that stuff. We've got it so it's fading on and off, and the animation is opening and closing as the pocket watch opens and closes. Maybe that's the thing also, is it's very flat. Whereas like when it closes, you can see some depth to it. Maybe we need to add more shadowing, but we also want to make it clearer so you can read the HP and your time and stuff. So if we add too much detail, it might also cause it to be less readable. I don't know. We'll figure something out. Functionality-wise, happy with that. Art-wise, I think it's still better than what we had before. It just needs continued iteration. I don't think there's anything else to cover for this stream. We'll probably be back, I don't know, a couple days, a week, I'm not sure. It's really depending on when I have the time. We've been making good progress, though. I'm pretty happy overall. The next big thing is, well, there's a lot of big things. There's a lot of content work that needs to be done. I'm curious to see if I can get the max time increasing cutscene figured out. Now that we have this mist in here, I think it's going to feel way more satisfying when you complete a room, and hopefully all the mist just fades away is my idea. And then this time is going to increase, your maximum amount of time is going to go up. So this bar will refill, which it's already doing, but we can hopefully draw more attention to it with the whole fog disappearing. That should make it a lot more visible that something is happening. I did want to, okay, last thing I want to check is just that question I asked a moment ago. If we fill in this whole space, it should do a cutscene where everything glows. Ah, okay. So any of the mist on the edges of the map disappeared during the glow. That makes sense because of some skybox layering stuff that we have to do. We do some weird shader stuff, so those things are conflicting. I'll deal with that a different day. Yeah, we'll be back when we'll be back. We're continuing to make progress. It's starting to feel very much like a video game. I think we're getting very close to being able to put a demo out. Whether that's itch, Steam, or both, I'll keep y'all updated.